I'm wide open. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Sorry, we are a functioning music store, and we're in here talking. It turns out you can make, like I was saying, you can make any violin hum if you turn it up all the way. Yeah, somebody had a concern about a violin. They're like, yeah, it's got a little hum to it. You go, well, show me your amp. And they show me the amp. Everything's on 12. You're like, well, it's probably going to make that sound. Sorry. Hope everybody's having a good Wednesday so far. Funny story. The title today is in troubleshooting, and we're going to be talking about how to troubleshoot your rig if something is not working right. And like just trying to help somebody troubleshoot theirs. Like, well, it's buzzing. You go, well, you got to turn it all the way up. So yeah, it's going to do that. But when I came in here, I'd shot a video this morning, and then I came in here to get ready to talk to you guys. And these lights that are up top, like half of them were out. I was like, well, I'm doing a video on troubleshooting. Let's see if I'm any good at troubleshooting. And what did I do? I flicked the switch. It's low voltage lights that are up ahead here, up overhead. And sometimes if you got a bad connection, there's two tracks. There's a track goes about to here, and then a track goes the rest of the way. Sometimes if there's a little, funk in that connection, you flick them on and off about a dozen times, it'll reconnect. And guess what it did? Reconnected. Feeling good about myself today. And yeah, it's going to go out halfway through. There's no doubt in my mind that halfway through this video on troubleshooting, these lights are going to go out above my head. And now you're going to know why. I was feeling so proud of myself. And I'm going to be like, now it turns out I'm just an idiot. Don't mind me. Okay. So one of the cool things about playing acoustic music, not that I would know because I don't do much of it, but one of the cool things about playing acoustic music is that you just get there. Like I was providing sound for an acoustic gig, an acoustic string quartet. And I'd set up a couple of mics and, balance the room or whatever. And they're supposed to start playing at 5:00. And it's 4:30. And I'm like, are they coming? Are they here? They're not here. Rock players, we know we got to play at 5. We're there at like 3. We're there early. These jokers come rolling in at like 4:55. Casual as all can be. They get in there, open the case, sit down, tune, start playing at 5:00. I'm like, I had forgotten how easy it is being an acoustic musician. You guys, your lives are different than ours. And that's one cool thing about being an acoustic player. You got a 5:00 gig. You can come strolling in at 4:55. Amplified gigs are not like that. And it's because, tech is amazing when it works. But so you got to get there and you got to set all this tech up, and then you have to fix everything that isn't working, because guess what? Some of it's not going to be working. And that's just how it is. We need a lot of time to deal with this stuff. The good news is, and the bad news is, that this happens to everybody. I'm kind of looking at this. I don't know if I look weird to y'all or not. Let's see if we can fix this color. I look green or something. Sorry. That better? Maybe. All right. Don't take it personal. It's not that the gear is mad at you. It's just that it happens to everybody. That tech doesn't always work. Now, there are some people that it's worse than others. I toured with a guy that was like a walk-in EMP, man. If we had something electronic on the stage and he went near it, it would quit working. In fact, we had our wireless in-ear monitor distro paddle set up on one side of the stage. And if he stepped between me and that paddle, my in-ears would cut out. And those things, man, they'll work through walls and everything. But if this guy stepped between me and the paddle, in-ears would cut out. So there are some people it happens to more than others. But it's, don't take it personal. It's just gear. That's what gear does. You set up, you're plugged in, everything's ready to play, and it's not working. So what do you do now? If you have some strategies for knowing how to deal with gear that isn't working, you don't have to panic. Just go, well, this is what happens. And I'll have to employ some of these strategies to make sure It's not on this end, Debbie. That's what I was just looking at my. I was looking at my mic, and everything's nice and steady here. Yeah, I don't know. You might have to troubleshoot that on your end. I'll give you some strategies for that here in a second. I would say don't assume that anything is true. Check everything. Don't trust anything, and then have a systematic approach. Have a plan from a start here, and then this, and then this, and then this, and go through, and I'm going to figure this out. So the first thing when I say don't assume, for every item, you got to ask yourself 2 questions. You say, well, I know my violin's working. Do you though? Do you know that your violin is working? And how do you know that your violin is working? So those are the 2 questions you have to ask. Don't trust anything. Assume nothing. So those 2 questions are going to be important. I plugged into this power strip and my stuff's not coming on. I know it has power. Do you though? Do you know it has power? Yeah, the light on the power strip is on. Okay, well, you know that the power comes to the light, but you don't know that it necessarily means that each of those outlets are hot. Maybe something's busted inside the thing. So do I really know that outlet is hot? And how do I know that outlet is hot? So maybe I'm going to unplug my pedal board from it that's not lighting up, and I'm going to plug something else into that outlet and see if it comes on. It might not come on. If it doesn't come on, does that tell me that outlet is bad? Maybe. The thing in my hand that I'm plugging in, the second thing I'm plugging in to check, it might not be working either. So maybe I've got to go plug into another outlet. Do you see where I'm going with this? You don't necessarily know until you know. So don't make any assumptions. And speaking of power, we'll talk about power for a minute. Power is goofy. In the U.S., we run at 100. We call it 110 volts. It's really 120 volts. And high power is generally not a problem. You don't generally worry about coming in and having something running at 130 volts or 140 volts. More commonly, the problem is something's running at like 95 or 100 volts. It's running low. And a lot of times that's because you've got an old bar that you're in, and maybe they've got the ice machine plugged in, or somebody's got something else plugged into there. The kitchen's run off, that same circuit that you're trying to run off of. And you'll have a low voltage situation, and your stuff will turn on, but it's not going to work right. Electronics really, really, really do not like low voltages. In fact, the band I toured with for a long time, all of our main power distros had voltage meters on them that were visible to us in the band. We could look over and see what the voltage was on any of the circuits that we're plugged into. And we had a rule that if it gets below 95, we're done. We will not run our gear below 95 volts because it's going to burn up. And your power supply in each one of those is going to try to make up that voltage. It's going to try to get you to that higher voltage, and stuff's going to burn up. It's no good. So the other thing that can happen is low batteries in your active electronics are going to make them act really weird too. So make sure that your batteries are changed. We get a lot of calls. People say, hey, I bought a violin from you guys and it was working great. And then it started making funny sounds for a couple hours and then it stopped working. You go, well, did you change the battery in it? I didn't know it had a battery in it. Yeah, it's got a battery in it. And we'll get that same call for LED lights, believe it or not. Bought an LED violin from you and now the lights, they started getting dim and then they quit working. Yeah, you got to change the battery. I don't know if you knew that lights require batteries, power, and you weren't plugging that violin into a wall. So yeah, batteries will work that way. They'll be working and then stuff will start going haywire and acting all funky and then it'll go out. So that's also power. If your voltage is low on your wall supply, stuff will act weird and then it'll stop working. With active violins, there's a switch inside the jack that turns on the preamp. So you can't leave them plugged in all the time. If you do your sound check at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and then you go get dinner and a couple of drinks and you come back at 11 to play your show and it doesn't work, it's probably because your battery's dead. you left it plugged in and it's sitting there draining power the whole time. And then you come back to play and it's like, it was working during sound check. It's not working now. Yeah, you probably killed your battery by leaving it plugged in. So as an active violin, you have to unplug them when you're not playing them so that you don't drain the battery. Speaking of power, phantom power. Do you guys know what phantom power is? Phantom power is a DC. It's a direct current power. And it's usually 48 volts, but it can be 24 or sometimes 11. There's a couple different phantom powers. 48 is the most common. And it is what powers your active microphones or DIs. The DPA microphone, which is really popular. The paracoustic DI, which is really popular. Both of those run on phantom power. It's called phantom power because there's no external power supply. The soundboard, you can ask them, hey, I'm on channel 13. Can you send phantom power to that channel? And they'll push a button and it'll send 48 volts down the down your signal cable, your XLR line. Send it back. You're sending signal one way, power's coming the other way to you. And it's going to turn that mic on, or it's going to turn that DI on. So if you've got an active mic, or you've got this active DI, and the lights aren't lighting up on them, it's often because they don't have the phantom power turned on for your channel. You'll have to let the engineer know, turn on the phantom power. There's a trap on phantom power, though. And if you look at a mic cable, there's 3 pins inside that cable. 2 of those are necessary for sending a passive signal. So if we plug a 58 or a passive mic into that channel and we check it, check, 1, 2, it's going to work, okay? If those 2 lines are connected and there's continuity on those 2 pins, then that passive microphone is going to work. And then they go to plug in your active microphone and you go, hey, it needs phantom power. He goes, yeah, I'm sending phantom power. It's lit up right here. If that 3rd line has a break in it, then it will work for a passive mic, but it will not work on an active mic. So that's kind of a trap. And sometimes you'll plug your XLR cable into a snake, and then the snake plugs into the board. So it could be that there's a break in the line in the snake. Could be there's a break in the line in the cable. You have to check them both to see if that's the problem. So that's a little trap that's kind of set for you with phantom power. Just be aware of that. It might save you butt when you're troubleshooting. And then, of course, there's a general principle called Occam's razor, and it's the simplest explanation is the most likely, okay? My wife used to teach at a medical school, and she would tell her students, you know, just think, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. Patient comes in with a headache, don't go directly to brain tumor. It's not a tumor. So don't go directly to brain tumor. Think stress, dehydration, tired. Maybe they haven't had their caffeine today. You know, those are very common causes for headaches. Brain tumor, you know, is pretty rare. Hopefully. So the first thing you want to think of if something's acting funny is not, oh, maybe there's a solar flare. I guess it could be. It's not super likely. It's more likely that you got a cable that's gone bad. So chase that stuff down first. Chase down the most obvious things first. And if you can't get the obvious things first, then we start looking for zebras. But we look for horses first. Yes. All right. I got a new thing here. I'm going to try this. Watch this. I got this. Boom. How's that work? Oh, look at there. I got a new comment thing. Al, what's happening, man? The Yamaha SV255 does have phantom power. That's very true. And it works great. Yeah. So with the 255, you can use a battery inside your control box, or you can use the phantom power that comes through the XLR line. But again, just be aware that if that phantom power, if they're sending it to you and they're like, yeah, it's lit up, it says it's coming, and you've maybe tested that line with a microphone, it could be that 3rd pin is not working, and that could be what's getting you in trouble. All right, so where was I? Oh yeah, next thing. Know your gear. You got to be intimately familiar with how everything is wired. If you go to a gig and you've got a pedal board and you don't know how that pedal board works, that could be a problem. You know, you're borrowing, hey, I borrowed this pedal board from my buddy. Man, you better hope that it works, because if you don't know how that pedal board works, if you don't know how it's wired, you are up a creek if you have to troubleshoot that thing. So make sure that you know how your stuff works. You put it together. You have to know that pedal board better than anybody else, and kind of know how any given failure is going to present itself. So I'll know that if it starts acting up in this way, it's probably because that cable is bad, or because this pedal isn't turned up, or something bumped on this one. You've got to know your gear in order to help you make troubleshooting decisions a little faster. All right, so let's do a real world example. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me last weekend. I've been doing this a really long time, like a really long time, longer than a lot of you guys have been alive. And I still bump into stuff like this. I showed up. I was actually late because I had something else going on. The band had already set up. They had sound checked. They were out eating dinner. I got to the venue, plugged my stuff in, went to sound check it, and everything's lit up on my pedal, and no sound is coming into my in-ears. Great. All right, well, let's figure this out. I'm here by myself. I'll figure it out. So the question is, hey, I know everything's plugged in and turned on. Is it really? Do I actually know that? How do I know that? And let's go through and check. So the first thing you do is you start with the violin, and you look at the violin, and I got my wireless plugged into it, unplug it, replug it, make sure that it's seated all the way. Look at the receiver. My particular receiver will light up a certain way to show me that it's getting signal. Yep, that is actually showing. All right, now we're going to look at the connection coming out of the wireless. Unplug it, replug it. The next thing that it goes to, unplug it, replug it, and make sure that all those cables are seated nice, because the thing's been bouncing down the road in the back of my car for a couple hours. Make sure that one of those cables hasn't come loose. I'm going to look underneath my pedal board and look at the power supply, make sure all the dip switches are where they're supposed to be. I built the thing. I know where those dip switches have to be. And let's make sure everything is completely seated and set properly. All right, we've done due diligence on that. Let's make sure that the volume knob is up on the violin, okay? Yep, that's up on the violin, because sometimes if you're trying to tune or whatever, you might turn your violin down so you don't disturb anybody. Yep, make sure my volume knob is all the way up. Volume put, that's why it's not making sound. My volume pedal. In this rig, this is my fly rig, I don't usually use a volume pedal, but I decided that night, well, you know, I have one in my car. I might as well hook it up just in case. And the volume pedal was all the way down, and that's why there wasn't any sound coming out. So turn the volume pedal up. Oh, there I am. I'm in my ears. Sounds great. Okay. So the next thing, if that hadn't done it, here's another thing that sometimes will happen if you are using a multi-effects pedal that has saved presets in it, and this has happened to me before, is, you know, it opens up and it's always on 3A or whatever the first preset that I usually use is, and it's sitting there on 3A, nothing's coming out. Gosh, what's going on here? Let's just click to another preset just in case. Click to another preset, boo, lots of sound coming out. All right. So the unit is working, the violin's working, the pedal board's working, everything's working. It's just that one preset for some reason isn't working, and maybe something got bumped and, you know, and then somebody hit the save button or whatever. So, okay, we may have to reprogram that one preset. But if you have a unit that has presets in it and you're not getting sound out of the thing, change presets and see if the next preset is working. All this is from experience. So all that stuff should just take a minute. Check all your connections, volume knobs, volume pedals, plug and unplug everything. Most of the time your pedal board doesn't have more than, I don't know, a dozen or so connections, and it shouldn't take very long to check that stuff. Now you've done all the due diligence that you can do to make sure that your stuff is as it should be before you start involving other people in your problem-solving process. So the next step is, okay, I think all my pedal board is wired up and connected the way it should be. Where does my signal go from there, and how can I check that? So does something on my pedal board have a headphone output? Yeah, in my case, my HX Stomp has a headphone output. And this was probably 6 months ago. I was actually sitting in with my old band, Spare Change, and we didn't have a sound check for me. I didn't play in the first set with them because they were playing music I don't like. So I came and played in the second set with them. and we didn't have a sound check. So during break, I came and plugged my stuff in. Sound guy goes, I don't have anything from you. All right, so I'm going to try to do all this troubleshooting with 1,000 people sitting here watching me. So first thing I did was pull out my in-ears and plug into the headphone output of my pedal board. And yes, the violin is working just fine through the end of my HX Stomp. That way we know that the problem has to be downstream from that. So if you've got headphone outputs on any of your devices, you can plug your in-ears in and listen. And if it's working up to that point, then you know the problem must be past that. If it's not working to there, then you know the problem must be before that. So all we can just sort of narrow things down and figure out, is the problem this way or that way from where this headphone jack is? And that's going to help cut those decisions in half that you maybe have to dig through and figure out what's going on. So if you know that you've checked your pedal board, you think your pedal board's working, everything past the problem must be past that, well, we just keep checking each step. Bypass some parts of this system if you can. Maybe go directly to a DI or go directly to the board and just plug your violin into that. Plug in and play. They go, yep, we got something here. Okay, so if we think your pedal board's working, because your in-ears, you could hear it through your headphone jack. We know the board's working. The problem is between your pedal board and the board. So then we just kind of start trying to bypass things and figure out where that problem is. Every step along the signal chain is a potential failure point. And you're like, oh my God, there's 1,000 things between me and the board. Probably not. Maybe 10 or 15. So all of a sudden we've taken something that seems like an intractable problem and we've put, it's no longer an infinite number of problems and potential problems. It's a finite number of potential problems. And we can deal with finite numbers, even if they're kind of big. If it's 30 things, that's fine. We can deal with 30 things because on average, we're going to find it at the 15th thing, right? On average, we're going to get halfway through before we find it. So we can do this. So take the violin. If we don't have anything coming out, nothing's working at all, fine. Let's take the violin. Let's plug it into an amp that we know is working. The guitar player's playing over there. It's always nice to make your guitar player stop. You're like, hey, can you not play that same lick again for the 4,000th time? You're never going to get it, dude. So we're going to take his cable, plug into the violin. Does the violin work? Yes, the violin works. Okay, so that's the first step. Do I know that my cable works? Let's take my cable and plug it into something, right? And then with first pedal, second. So we're going to try to go through all of these connections. The DI could be the cable running from the DI to the snake. The snake channel could be bad. The board channel could be bad. All these things that we know are in order, we're just going to follow the signal all the way through until we find the thing that isn't working. Be sure to ask dumb questions because I love it when a dumb question solves the problem. Because if it's something like, oh, I forgot to run the cable from here to here, that's great because it's an easy fix. It doesn't cost any money. It's real fast. I love it when a dumb question solves the problem. So ask all the dumb questions. Is everything plugged in? You set the DI out. You go, did you run a cable from the DI to the snake? Oh man, I forgot. I was busy running lights or whatever. Well, great. That's easy. We can run a DI. We can run another cable. Is everything turned on? Al was talking about his SV255. A lot of Yamaha violins have a power switch on the back. So, man, I got everything plugged in and I'm playing. I've checked all my connections. Everything seems to be working. Did you turn the violin on? So turn it on. Oh, man, I feel like such a dummy. But no, it's all right, man. It's easy. Could it be a dead battery? Is it not turned up? Sometimes that has happened to me where I've turned the violin down to sit hacking around where I'm not going to bother anybody. And then we're getting ready to play and I'm like, oh, my violin isn't working. That's because I turned it down. Oh, snap. Is there a bad cable? Did I plug into the wrong channel? The engineer's like, I told you to plug into channel 15. And you're like, oh, I thought you said 50 because you yelled it across the room. And so I'm plugged into 50 and you're looking in channel 15 and that's why you can't hear me. So make sure you're plugged into the right channel. This one is super frustrating. Multiple failures are possible. We've had a situation, I've come across a situation where it turned out that the snake channel and the channel on the board were both bad. Plugged into channel 21 in the Snake, 21 on the board. I verified that my signal is working all the way up to the Snake. Verified that, okay? And it turns out, well, let's go to channel 22 on the Snake. So we unplug and we replug channel 22. No, that's not working either. Ah, man, what is it? It turned out that channel 21 on the Snake and channel 21 on the board were both bad at the same time. That's awful because it takes forever to figure that out. And you just, where it ends up is you just don't trust anything. Don't trust that that channel is working, even if it was working 10 minutes ago. When they go bad in an instant, and it could have been this instant right here. So that is always a possibility. Now, the things that we've been talking about so far are like, it's not working at all, right? No signals coming through. That's not the only thing that you have to troubleshoot sometimes. Sometimes you're like, well, the signal's coming through, but it doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like I'm expecting it to sound. So check all your settings. Make sure that somebody hasn't bumped one of the knobs on your board. That happens all the time. That, hey, I loaded my pedal board into the case. We got it out. Sometimes in transit, those knobs will turn. And you're like, man, this thing sounds terrible. Yeah, well, I look down at my board and I'm like, oh, well, wow, the highs are all the way up on that. No wonder it sounds terrible. So make sure all of your knobs and stuff on your pedal board are where they're supposed to be. Make sure that the volume on the violin's right. Make sure that you don't have some sort of weird gain thing going on your wireless. And also be sure that you're actually, like I've been practicing on my little practice amp at home, and then I come here and we plug into a big PA and wow, that sounds really different. That doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. You've got to ask yourself, how do I know that it's wrong, right? So the two questions are is it really? You go, this sounds weird. Does it though? Does it sound weird? Maybe it just sounds weird to you because you're used to hearing yourself out of a little 3-inch speaker. Or the other question is, how am I hearing myself? Am I hearing myself through my in-ears? There may not be anything wrong with my gear at all. Who else has control over that besides me? Well, it could be that this board that we're using tonight at this festival or whatever, maybe they had a vocalist plugged into that channel last night and had some wonky EQ on it. And you go, hey, is this flat and dry, what you're sending me? Oh, no, there's a weird EQ on here. Well, that could be why it doesn't sound right. So every single step along the way is a potential failure point. Just sort of follow the signal all the way through and see if you can figure out where things have gone wrong. And even if it's not a failure point, it could be a, like, it really twisted my sound in a weird way point. So check. Panning is another thing. Sometimes you'll have a panning issue where maybe that channel had been panned all the way to the right last night because it was keyboard right. And you plug into it and are like, well, it's only coming out of one side of the PA. It's not necessarily because you've got something hooked up wrong. It could be that the pan is set wrong. Also, it could be an assignment issue. It may be getting a little bit deep for this, but I'm a front of house guy too. Sometimes we'll have subgroups set up on the board, and maybe they had the channel that you're in tonight was in a different subgroup for something. Maybe it was in a vocal subgroup last night, and I need to reassign it to an instrument subgroup. And that's why I didn't have you, because that fader was down because you were assigned to the wrong subgroup. So there are a ton of failure points, but the way you find them is by starting the instrument and just working your way through all the way to the end. One of the major problems that people will have is buzz, hum, static noise. Like the violin's working and it's coming through, but there's something coming through with it that I don't like. The first question to ask, is it just you? So am I the only one that has this particular issue, is a buzz or a hum or some noise? Because if everybody on stage has that hum, then that tells me something different than if it's just me that has that hum. Or maybe it's just those of us on this side of the drummer that have that hum. So if there is noise in your channel, first thing you do, again, do your due diligence on your pedal board check to make sure everything is right on your pedal board, okay? Maybe we can swap channels. I was in channel 12. Let's go to channel 15 and see if that fixes it. Yeah, not a good buzz either. I got a buzz and I'm not happy about it. Check the power. This happened at MW Rock last summer. If you guys haven't come to MW Rock, you really should. It's amazing. It's like the center of the electric violin universe for a week in Kansas. It's the Mark Wood Rock Orchestra camp. My son was working there as a tech this summer. He was 15. And we had an electric cellist was playing, and he was 100% sure that there was a ground problem with his cello. He came as, I'm going to have to resolder something with my cello. It's buzzing. It's crazy. And we went, well, that's not like a super common thing because it was working yesterday. It's not like a ground would have necessarily just gone bad between yesterday and today. It can happen, but, zebras, horses, I'm betting it's something else. So we went in and we're checking stuff around and plugging into this and plugging into that. Yeah, it's still buzzing. And then Isaac, my son, was like, let me chase down the power because these things are all plugged into the same couple of power strips that are running to a feed that's going underneath the stage. He goes back and it's an extension cord plugged into an extension cord, plugged into an extension cord, plugged into a wall. One of those extension cords, the ground pin had broken off. You got your 2 power pins in the ground underneath. The ground pin had broken off. So he replaced that extension cord with a good one and boop, wasn't buzzing anymore. So make sure you're checking your power. Make sure you're checking all your cables. Unplug and replug. And when you unplug, you go, whoops, that's not good. That's gonna find some of your problems. Check all your cables, change your batteries, and then maybe change the circuit. If those of you on the left side of the drummer, you're all plugged into the same wall circuit, and the guys on the other side of the drummer are plugged into a different wall circuit, maybe your circuit's got dirty power in it somehow, or there's some sort of ground issue between the circuit that you're on and the circuit that everybody else is on. That could be a problem. And then kind of like the last thing to maybe try is to use one of those ground lifts. Any electrician's going to be like, dude, please do not do that. You just created a fire hazard. Well, we got extinguishers, man. That might be the only thing that's going to make the thing stop buzzing. So that's a good question, Debbie. I'll get to that in a minute. Actually, I'll get to that really close because that was my last slide. So, all right. So let's go here and then here. All right. Oops. Debbie. What was the best approach to let the sound guy know you're buried in the mix without offending them? Okay, so the 2 questions we ask ourselves. You say, well, I'm buried in the mix. Are you really, though? How do you know? How do you know you're buried in the mix? And if the way you know, or the way you think you know, that you're buried in the mix is that you walked out front and it sounded like you were buried in the mix, you're probably wrong about that. And the reason is, if I'm on stage and I'm listening to my monitors, my monitor is the Matt Bell Show. It's all about me and my monitor because I have to be able to hear me. I can hear everybody else, but they're not as loud as me. And there are lots and lots of Matt Bell in my mix. Believe me, nobody wants to hear that but me. So I take my in-ears out and I step out into the room and wow, I'm not nearly as loud out front as I am in my in-ears. It sounds like I'm buried to me because my ears have gotten acclimated to like all fiddle all the time, right? So if I step out in the room, I'm like, wow, there's really not nearly enough fiddle in here. That's probably not true. It probably is just fine. And it just doesn't sound like it's very loud to me, okay? That's one possibility. The other possibility is that a person whose ear you trust has come up to you, and it doesn't mean like, this is your best friend. Because as a sound guy, myself, that's the one we always get. The guitar player's girlfriend comes up and goes, I can't hear him in the mix. Honey, he's the loudest thing in the room. Like, I'm having trouble getting the drums over him because he's the loudest thing in the room. What you're used to hearing at home is nothing but him. And, well, you're here to hear him. Maybe you don't like the drummer. So that is a good question to say, how do I know that I'm buried in the mix? Maybe a person whose ear you trust comes to you and tells you, hey, nobody can hear anything you're doing. Like, and I actually know what I'm listening for, because that's the thing that I would get to when I was playing with my old band. People go, I can't hear the fiddle. And I'm like, I can hear the fiddle. I've got my in-ears in. I can still hear the mains over my in-ears. I can hear me in the mains over my in-ears. I know it's out there. And I trust my sound guy. He and I had been working together for 10 years. The thing is, what you're hearing is my organ pedal. Like, you're seeing a fiddle and you're hearing an organ, and your brain has not processed that that's actually the violin. So you do have to ask that question, how do I know that I'm being buried in the mix? Now, it does happen that you're buried in the mix. How to tell a sound guy that without offending them? Boy, that's a tough one, because sound guys, we're a little funny, man. The last thing we want to hear is somebody going, I can't hear the violin. You're like, bro, like that's like my 35th, my 35th priority right now. I'm dealing with a vocal mic that's crackling in and out or whatever, so, and sound guys are just grumpy. I don't know why. We're usually grumpy because nobody feeds us. That's probably why we're grumpy. It's hard. It's really hard to do that. And I don't know that I've come up with a tried and true method. Part of the way that you can have communication with your sound guy without offending them is that you start that relationship long before, like, the gig. Like, when I get there, I'm gonna chat with them, and we're gonna have some fun, kind of cutting up. And when I go to the bar, as I'm getting ready before sound check, I'm gonna go grab a beer. I'm like, hey man, do you need a drink? I'm going to the bar. Like, make friends with them. Be nice to them. I know it's weird, but be nice to the sound guy. And then, maybe I'm getting some feedback that my violin is really not in the mix. And then I can just ask, hey man, are you getting everything you need from me? Are we good? And sometimes they go, man, I'm having a hard time getting you out here. I just don't have enough signal from you. Oh, well, I can send more. So sometimes that question right there can be one, hey man, are you getting everything that you need from me? And that's sometimes if they're not thinking about you, maybe they're not used to, like here, like you're saying, maybe they're not used to having a violin in the mix. They're used to bass guitars, drums, vocal, and that's kind of where their brain goes. And they're like, oh crap, I forgot we had a violinist. Sometimes just asking that question, hey man, are you getting everything you need from me? They're like, oh, yep, got a violin. Better slide that in there. So that might be, just as I'm thinking about it, that might be the best thing to ask them. And then put it back on you, so that you're not accusing them of being bad at their job. That might be a good way to go after that. Let's see, what are some questions here? Somebody said, I need an e-violin for practice and maybe to perform. If you don't care about performance, this one right here I like a lot. This is the YSV 104. This is only designed for practice, because this has to be used with it, this little control box. And if you look, this thing only has, is it going to focus on that? It is not. There we go. It only has a headphone out. So there's no 1/4 inch out, there's no XLR out, it's just a headphone out. And like, technically you can run a little 1/8 inch line into using adapters. That's kind of, it's not a thing you should do for a number of reasons. So if you have a YSV 104, there's a little bit of voodoo that they put in that box that they make them sound really good. Yeah. They sound really good in your headphones. And if it's just a practice violin, they're wonderful. Like them a lot. If you want one for practice and performance, well, then any of these are going to be great. And it's, like somebody suggested here. I think a lot of people prefer. What did somebody say? I think somebody sort of answered that. So what did it say? Yeah, we've got a ton of videos. Thank you, Cryptic Fairy. If you go to our YouTube channel, we have a bunch of review videos of different violins, and they're all different. So like, there's features and numbers of strings, and do they have headphone amps? Do they not? All these different things. It's really kind of hard to answer that question without knowing exactly what your specific needs are. So yeah, I would say totally go to our YouTube channel and check out some of the reviews that we've done. Yes, 100%, Megan. If there is a buzz, I forgot to put that in there. That's right, because I thought about that and then I forgot to add it. If there is a buzz on like just your side of the stage, really could be any side of the stage. Yeah, neon lights in a bar, chasing that neon rainbow. So yeah, if there's neon lights in there and you shut those neon lights off, you're gonna hear your buzz go bzzz. You're like, oh, that's way better. Yeah. Yeah, so if there's a bunch of neon lights on the back, and I think a lot of people are going to LEDs now, which are not nearly as bad. But neon lights, yes, can very much cause buzzing and problems. And it's not the light, it's the power supply thing that's in there that makes them go all crazy. And margarita machines too. I have not had that experience, but I believe you. Ooh, Chuck Bontrager's here. What's going on, man? Yeah, it's because the sound guys are afraid of us. They're afraid of you. I went to go play. I played in Chuck's doctorate recital in Chicago, or in Champaign, Illinois. And what did we measure you at, Chuck, in front of the stage? I had my dB meter. It was like 109 dB or something at the front of the stage. It was toasty. He didn't have to be in the PA. He was in the PA, but he didn't have to be. Get a Lindsay box. Yeah, good luck with that. So the thing with this is not a 250 or 255, but they're very similar. The output on these is a little 1/8 inch output here, but that can't go to anything but the control box. The control box is the only thing that can go to. If you try to send this 1/8 inch to something other than this control box, you're not going to get any. Nothing's going to happen. So the SV250, which is what Lindsey Sterling plays, it's a big control box. It's huge, and it's got XLRs and 1/4 inches and all kinds of stuff in it, and they're big and they're heavy. And if you know anything about what Lindsey does, she's like this big. She'll fit in your pocket, and she is dancing and flying around all the place. Man, she don't need no big honking box on the back of her. She's already got wireless transmitters and in-ear receivers, and there's like 15 boxes on her already. She don't need another freaking box. So Yamaha Pro Shop, the custom shop, came up with a little tiny box that's got all those preamp electronics in it, and they mounted it underneath the chin rest on her SV250. Call it the Lindsay box. Christian House has one on his. Kev Marcus from Black Violin has one on his. And they made a couple more, and we had a few of them, and they kind of got handed out to some folks. But their custom shop isn't going to make any more of those, I don't think. We've been begging them can you just please make the Lindsay box available for everybody? And they don't seem to have any interest in doing it. And so if you talk to anybody at Yamaha, beg them to start doing that. Ooh, yeah, I'd forgotten about this. 114 at the speaker grill. That's dBA, by the way. And 110 at the front of the stage. That is loud. That is really loud. Matt, what's happening, man? Do you ever see any Tucker Barretts? I occasionally see a Tucker Barrett. Very seldom will one be available for sale. I've probably played 5 or 6 of them that have come through here, but in like the last 7 or 8 years since I've been here. They're pretty rare. Obviously he's not making violins anymore. So, Aaron Kerr, what's happening? Bought a 6-string line by 3D Various. I just had a 6-string line sitting here that I just played. Like literally, we were coming on air when I was playing that. Recommendations for a practice amp. It depends. That's always my answer. Everybody who knows me knows that's my answer to everything. It depends. It depends on like how big you want it to be, how much you want to spend. That low F string does have a little bit of booty to it, so it would be nice if your amp had some booty, but if it's a practice amp, you're not going to be getting very loud anyway. You're not going to be moving a lot of air in your house. Honestly, I really like the Boss Katana 50, and it's big. It's a little funny to think that this would be a practice amp. Like, here we go. for scale, you'd go like, that's kind of big for a practice amp. But the reason I like this amp, first, it's really cheap. These are like $200 and some. And right here, your power control can go to your full 50 watts, 25 watts, or 0.5 watts. So you can find the settings that you like on stage with your 50 watt setup, and you come home and you put it on 0.5 watts. You don't have to change any of your settings. All your tones are going to be the same. So if you're hoping for something on your desktop, it's a little big to sit on your desktop, but any of the desktop amps are going to cost at least as much as this. It's got a bunch of effects and stuff in it. And you don't really mind kind of flipping through the dials and all that to get your effects when you're practicing. Maybe it's not ideal for performance. They do have some foot pedals that you can use, and you can save your settings and stuff. Honestly, I would say the Katana 50 is a better practice amp than it is a performance amp. And people really like them for performance. I think it's maybe even better as a practice amp. Yes, that is very loud. And that's true. Yeah, Chuck wouldn't sound like Chuck if he was all quiet. So that part is true. Awesome questions, guys. Thanks for sharing those. Were there any questions about troubleshooting? I know anybody or comments about troubleshooting? I know most of you guys who've been doing this for a long time have had experiences with things that go bad. And I'm just trying to share some tips for people that like are maybe kind of new to this. Like, hey, your snake channel and your board channel can both be bad. The other thing about the phantom power, that, you know, I checked this line with a 58 and it worked just fine. And we plugged in your DPA and we pushed the phantom power button on the board. I don't know why it's not working. It could be that third pin is bad and there's no way to know except for pinning it out. So yeah, and that's kind of the difference sometimes between an audio engineer and a sound guy. Is that an audio engineer, person with an engineering degree, is going to know like what some of these voltages are supposed to be and how the physics behind all this stuff works. And a sound bro is just a guy who's turned some knobs a few times. So sometimes it's nice to have like an actual engineer on the job, or somebody with an engineering background on the thing. So yeah, that is that part's true. It's follow the chain. Start with the instrument and just, hey, I know the instrument's working. Do you though? How do you know? Go check it. So take the instrument, plug it into something else. Make sure it's actually sending a signal. I know my cable worked because it worked yesterday, but you don't know that it works right now. So take it with you. So yeah, you have to check every little thing, follow the chain. And then sometimes if you're thinking, man, like this is a little daunting, I've got 5 minutes to figure out why this isn't working, because that's when stuff always breaks. Start in the middle of your chain and check something in the middle. And then you at least know, is it before that or after that? So then you've cut the problem in half. And then cut it in half again. And so, yeah, as many things as you can check that sort of cut your signal chain in half. Hey, there's 30 steps between my violin and the board. Well, halfway through, let's figure out where that is. Okay, here we go. I always get a buzz in my Hotone effects pedal. I've never worked with a Hotone effects pedal. I always need to use the DI box. Needing to use the DI box is normal. Yes, you should use a DI box. And there's a number of reasons for that without getting into all the crazy science behind it. Yes, you should be using a DI box. And it could be, I don't know what you're powering your Hotone effects pedal with, but it could be that your power supply is a little goofy. Yeah, maybe it's that maybe that's just what Hotones do. I'm not experienced with those. I'm a line 6 guy. But with buzzes, I check a couple of things. I check power. Dirty power can cause a buzz, so maybe run it through a power conditioner instead of just a power strip. You can get a power conditioner and run through a power conditioner. I know Furman was a big power conditioner that we always use, rack mount Furmans. All of our power went through Furman power conditioners. You can make sure that you're using an isolated power supply too. Instead of just plugging in like a one spot, you could use an isolated power supply will oftentimes knock down the buzz. And those isolated power supplies are usually a couple $100 too. So, and then sometimes you're just playing places that have noisy power. So that's also a possibility. Yeah, they're tiny and they break easily. No, that's unfortunate. Oh, are they cheap? Are they pretty inexpensive? I've never worked with a hotel. If they're pretty inexpensive, yeah, Megan's right. You get what you pay for. Like you'd think in 2023 they could make a $50 effects pedal that doesn't buzz, but it turns out, yeah, there are some things that you can do, but like I said, you might spend several $100 trying to like fix a problem. Maybe you're throwing good money after bad. It may be worth spending a little bit more money and getting a better pedal. I don't know. Again, I've never worked with a Hotone. I don't know. That's outside my area of expertise. Yeah, that's the other thing I love about this community. Like people just jump in with stuff. I don't always know the answer, but I know a lot of smart people, and sometimes they know the answer. I'm not getting paid to drink what I just drank, so I'm not going to show you what it was. All right. So no other questions, I don't think. If one sneaks in here in the next couple seconds, I'll take it. In the next couple weeks, I think we've got some really cool artists for you guys. I think we're going to be talking Earl Manian. And I think we're going to be talking to Kishibashi in the next couple weeks. Earl Manian has a new project out. He has 2 new projects out, actually. Earl's a really good buddy of mine. He may not feel the same way about me, but he's a good friend to me. He has 2 new projects out. One of them, he wrote a concerto called Dependent Arising. And Rachel Barton Pine recorded that concerto with Shostakovich 1. So the Scottish Royal Symphony or Scottish National Symphony under Tito Muñoz recorded those 2 concertos, the Shostakovich 1 and the Manian concerto, and those are on an album together. It's amazing. It's an incredible piece of art. It's all based on heavy metal themes. Earl's a metalhead, Rachel's a metalhead, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. So yeah, super excited about Earl's project there. The other project, he works with Dillinger Escape Plan, the metal band, works with them a lot. He's friends with those guys. His quartet has played with them. They put out an album, and his string quartet, 2 acoustic violins, acoustic viola, and acoustic cello, they covered the entire Dillinger Escape Plan album just with acoustic string quartet. And it is incredible. It's amazing. Everybody loves it. If you don't love it, then you're not part of everybody. Huh. So it is really, really good. So we had Earl on last week talking about transferring techniques from acoustic to electric and maybe back and forth. We're going to get him to show us that little chug thing that he does with his right hand. That is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He's the only guy I know on the planet who can do what he does at the level that he does it. So we're going to get Earl on, hopefully, to talk about the chug, the concerto that he wrote for Rachel, and the Dillinger Escape Plan cover album. And then Kishibashi, if you don't know who that is, what an amazing singer, songwriter, violinist, guitar player. He is an incredible artist. We've interviewed him as part of the Rockstar Violinist podcast. He has, I'm going to massacre this word, Omayari, I think is the name of the album. He wrote an album basically about the Japanese internment camps during World War II and did a documentary on this and created all the music for it and the documentary for it. And he has agreed to come on and talk to us about the music, about the story behind it, about his relationship with that whole story and the documentary. And so we're going to have an interview with Kishibashi, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, about what's all going on with his newest project. So very, very exciting stuff coming for you guys. All right, so let's see if I can get this question. Need a new bow, looking at Coda Bow Diamond. Will it be lots better than my 20-year-old $400 wooden bow? Oh my God, yes. So yeah, so for me, carbon fiber, if we're talking about low-end violin bows, and low-end meaning below, I don't know, $2,000, carbon fiber is going to be better than wood at that price. Like a $600 wood bow and a $600 carbon fiber bow, I will take that carbon fiber bow every day of the week and twice on Sunday without knowing any more than what I know right now. They're more repeatable. You might get lucky and get a really good $400 wooden bow, or whatever it was. You might have gotten lucky and just got one that was super amazing. But if I have to just pick a $400 wooden bow and a $400 carbon fiber bow, you're almost certainly going to get a better bow with the carbon fiber bow. They're more repeatable. They don't care what the weather does. They don't care if it's humid outside. It's, unless I'm going like a high-end bow, more than a couple $1,000s, and yeah, more than a couple thousand wouldn't even be considered high-end. If the price has 6 digits in it, that would be a high-end bow, or high five digits. But yeah, I mean, like a $10,000 bow would not be considered a high-end bow. It's a good bow. So yeah, if we're talking below $2,000, these are cheap bows, and you're almost certainly going to get a better bow with carbon fiber. And the fact they're nearly indestructible. I have broken one, but I had to work really hard at it. I did it on purpose. But I throw my carbon fiber bows all the time, like just launch them across the stage. I don't care. I'll heave them, and haven't broke one yet. So yeah, I would say that a $400, and I don't even know if Coda Bow makes a $400 bow anymore. Like the Diamond GX, I think is $800 or $900.
The NX is $470.
The NX is $470, I'm told, and that's a good bow. And people have asked about. You guys know about the law of diminishing returns, right? A $400 bow and an $800 bow. Like the $800 bow is not twice as good as the $400 bow. It's a lot better. I wouldn't say it's twice as good, but it's not twice as good. It's better. The question is, how much do you need that? So, maybe it's 50% better. How bad do you need that 50%? Well, I happen to need it. So you end up paying double to get a bow that's 50% better. And then when you go 800 to 1600, you end up paying double more to get one that's 25% better. And if you need that 25%, then you got to pay the money. But yeah, there's a point of diminishing returns for sure. And I think the NX is kind of at that sweet spot where below that, you're definitely getting your money's worth to spend up to that 470 or whatever it is. I say that the Diamond NX to me is sort of like at the corner of that sweet spot. So yeah, I think below that $470, you're going to see a pretty steep drop off with price and quality. Above that, yes, an $800 bow is significantly better than a $400 bow, but I wouldn't say it's twice as good, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's fun. I have several bows. I have a Jewel. I have a Marquis. Probably my favorite bow is my Arcus P6. It ought to be for the price. So yeah, I have a bunch of different bows. I have a couple of Glasser bows, man. The Glasser, I've got a bow that Andrew sent me one time along with an instrument that he wanted me to try out. I was helping him design some instruments, and he just included a bow with it. And he's like, hey, I need the violin back for, because, you're going to do some markings or whatever on it and send the violin back to me. I'm like, I'll send the violin back, but you're not getting that bow back. You're going to have to come to my house if you want that, because that is the smoothest bow I've ever played. I had to do Midsummer Night's Dream for something in all those light little brush strokes. And that Glasser bow is the brushiest, wispiest, excuse me, that Glasser bow is the smoothest, brushiest. It is the perfect bow for playing like Midsummer Night's Dream or anything wispy like that. It was incredible. So yeah, I have a bunch of bows and they're all different and I use them all for different things. I have one that is half synthetic hair and half horsehair that I've used if it's super, super humid out. Yeah, I have a bunch of bows, but probably the best overall bow is the Arcus P6, and it's not close. Arcus bows are significantly better than Coda bows, but they're significantly more expensive, so they ought to be. All right, this has been a lot of fun. All right, I'm going to get out of here, and then I will see you guys, I hope next week, with either Kishibashi or Romanian. If not, then I don't know. I'll come up with something else to talk about. But you guys have a great week. I will talk to you soon, and yeah, go be excellent to each other.